Hi, everybody. Welcome back to LA Not So Confidential. This is Dr. Scott. I'm, of course, not by myself because there's no way I could possibly imagine doing this show alone. I am here with the lovely, talented, and brilliant Dr. Shiloh. Hi, Dr. Shiloh.
That's me. No, you could completely do this by yourself, by the way.
No, I couldn't. I would start laughing at my own jokes. I mean, I am so close to falling for my own bullshit anyway that you're the only thing that tethers me to reality, Dr.
There'd
Shiloh.
be nobody to just cut you off and redirect you.
No.
It would be a whole other show, but you could do it.
Yes, it would be a very different show. Hey, Happy New Year. Happy official...
No, we're not allowed to say it anymore. It's 2 weeks in.
Oh, come on. No.
Come on.
I just got all the decorations down. So it's
Don't you watch Arrested Development? Like you get 4 days, 7 days? I can't remember.
I love that show. So yeah, we have a crazy cool subject this week that was inspired by a dear friend of mine, Jake, who I met years and years and years ago at the gym here in West Hollywood. And then we reconnected by chance when we ran into each other in Santa Barbara when I was in grad school.
What?
He is a person that has for years been involved in dog shows. And also recently in the last decade, because we got a lot of years between us, he breeds dogs and is very select, very small, not like a huge operation kennel, but has a very, very highly rated dog that he sires out. They're beautiful dogs. They're like really beautiful dogs.
Are you a dog person?
I am a human person, but I do love dogs.
Okay, good.
I'm actually a human, although people don't think that I am at times. No, right. Dan and I absolutely adore dogs, and we adore dog sitting. We also, Dan became a cat person after we cat sat, but it was also like a cat that thought it was a dog.
Sure, those are the best.
But yeah, I'm a huge dog fan. And like, I have to keep from being creepy when I'm at the dog park that's outside of work, because I just I'll ignore the humans and just be fascinated by the joy that these dogs are experiencing with each other.
Isn't that so funny?
Pure joy.
Yeah, right outside Scott's government work building is a big old patch of grass that has become like the downtown LA dog park.
Yeah.
It's pretty great.
It's fantastic. It's not what the intention was for that piece of land.
Right.
And I love that the agency is open about doing that. So that's pretty cool.
We have always had dogs in my family.
Yeah.
So,
but you've had different kinds of dogs, right? I mean, Ellie's a
bull terrier.
Bull terrier. Okay.
We just, we didn't go through like some big breeder or anything. We just kind of found somebody local that had them. My husband's always wanted one. We had 3 Dalmatians when I was growing up. So we had, several iterations of Dalmatians. And then
so did Dan.
Oh, really? No kidding.
Yeah, they always had Dalmatians and the names were always D names.
Oh, so we went Disney. We had Pongo and Perdita.
Oh, that's sweet.
And then I owned a Weimaraner as kind of my first dog when I moved out. Madison. Do you remember Madison? Were we friends with Madison?
No. They're great dogs.
Yes, she was just such a sweetheart. Her AKC name was Madison Liberty Blue.
So that's your official...
That's her official registered
name, your registry name. Okay.
Correct.
Which is a big thing. Okay.
Yeah, we'll get into that.
Yeah, we're going to get into that. We're touching on a completely new topic, but it does certainly weave into a lot of the site concepts we talked about before, but specifically in different ways and in ways that are not well researched. There's only like a handful of research papers about this particular topic. We're talking about crimes related to dog shows, like violence perpetrated on animals as a result of competitions. And there's a few cases of them. Thankfully, there's only a few. They are terrible. They're absolutely terrible. And listen, I would not be surprised if this show actually has more controversy than a lot of our other shows. One of the reasons is that people can get a lot more angry about issues regarding their animal companions because we can be disinhibited in that way because we feel very protective about the animals we care about. And that can even extend into your life view about what our role as animal caregivers and protectors are on this planet. So I get it. This is controversy. We got very strong opinions about dog shows and dog breeding. This episode was suggested by my friend. He was the one that turned me on to this world because I don't know anything about it. I mean, I barely know the surface level of it, competitive dog shows. And it is surprising how horrible these crimes are that have come out of them. So we want to make some very specific distinctions here about the overlaps of these various worlds. And like I was saying, other than my friend, my only other exposure to like the annual Westminster Dog Show was the wonderful and sometimes challenging mockumentary entitled Best in Show that was created by director, writer, actor Christopher Guest and his wildly talented ensemble of performers that tend to repeat in his productions.
Absolutely.
You just watched it again, right?
Yeah, I watched it today while I was doing some work. My absolute favorite of all of his films.
Really?
Yes.
I love it. I think A Mighty Wind, the fake folk music documentary is a good one, but Waiting for Guffman, they're all amazing.
Yeah. So what are the challenging parts of it for you?
Well, one of the challenging parts for me is the portrayal of the gay couple. I feel like that is the one thing that Christopher Guest does that is a bit annoying to me, is that he does tend to portray these very stereotypical gay characters. Now, that being said, is that everybody is an equal opportunity object of gentle ridicule.
Yes.
And
agreed.
I'm probably a little bit more sensitive because of that actor's portrayal. Oh God, I'm blanking on his name, so I'm going to vamp.
Yeah, it doesn't hold up, as well. Looking at it today, still great comedy, great improv, a lot of other fantastic characters. But yeah, I noticed it. It didn't hold up as well.
So yeah, the actor's name is John Michael Higgins.
Yes.
He plays the character Scott Donian, and he is the life partner of Stefan Vanderhoof, played by Michael McKean. And they are great together. And you see that it's a very positive relationship, which is wonderful.
Yep.
And there are elements that John Michael Higgins does with his character, but it also gets into this thing of like, it's a straight guy playing a gay character, and it's a stereotypical, over-the-top, effeminate character.
Sure.
That being said, there are individuals that does represent a fraction of our society. And from a lot of what I've read, especially the article that talks about how do dog show people feel about the movie Best in Show. And a lot of them were saying this is very representative. It's not exaggerating a lot. So, that's probably my own stuff. People who are here listening to me, I own my shit as best I can. And I'm always interested in other people's opinion of how I'm doing it.
Right.
May not agree, but like I can always have it for discussion. So
definitely. Yeah. Well, I am all about stepping into this world of dog shows. Not something I've given a lot of thought to before. I think 2 weeks ago when I was getting my nails done, the Westminster Dog Show was actually up on the television, but I know they have their dirty little secrets. So, I mean, did you know that there's a glass ceiling at the Westminster Dog Show?
Tell me about that.
So there was a report done by Reuters in 2018 that found that male dogs won the competition 71 times, while female dogs have only won 39 times.
Yeah, I did not know that until we started pulling the research. And that little nugget blew my mind because, like I said, there's very little research about this particular issue. Now, that thing that did come up that's allegedly related to the female's birth cycle and the periods of heat, which don't dovetail well with the rigorous schedule of grooming, training, prepping, and participating in competitive dog shows.
Right, which they also say when that comes up that the female dogs tend to be very temperamental when they're having their cycle. So
I'm not going to touch that.
Unpredictable out there,
I'm not going to touch that anywhere.
But also, that's a breeding age for them.
Yes, it's
kind of the
peak,
prime,
right?
The prime age for breeding is the prime age also for showing, supposedly. And so, if you have a female dog that maybe this gets into some of the problematic nature that is just going to sort of be a puppy machine, that might be the role that they have her in instead of showing. So, Anyway, before we go any further, I think we do just want to give a trigger warning in that for the legal part, I am going to touch on animal cruelty to just break that down so we know what that is. People can kind of see how that folds in here or not. Yeah. We're going to stay away from details. We could get detailed. We got a lot of information that was detailed. We got a lot of photographs from our resource that were detailed. I know that many, many people who listen to true crime have a stronger reaction to crimes against animals than they even do to humans at this point. So we're not going to go down that rabbit hole, although we will be sort of clinically, again, talking about some of this stuff.
Yeah. And if we get to it, we may reflect a little bit on our day-to-day experience and our day jobs. Sure. That have to do with animal cruelty without going into too much detail. So, yeah. So we're going to do some term definition. So what was it that you were thinking that dog breeding basically entailed when you came into this?
I mean, I didn't give too much thought about it going into it, which again, I'm glad I did. And I do have more opinions now. And I think it will shape my own behaviors as far as purchasing dogs in the future. You know, you always know that, okay, pet stores are bad, puppy mills, all of that. Stay away from that. But I think I'm just going to give a little bit more thought to it because I feel like with the dog breeding, especially breeding for show, I mean, it's about this weird obsession with the standards of quote unquote beauty and purity, right? I mean, it feels very like eugenics vibes to me.
Yeah, I think it does. And then because we have the opportunity to, go a little bit further into it, it's not always about that. And it's interesting that there's an element of what breeders have done, which is actually preserved and brought some, positive DNA into the lines of these dogs. And they've been very careful when it's done right. So there's a whole spectrum of behaviors out there that I think we'll be talking about. There is some recent research that comes from Australia that was looking at the phenomenon within their country. And this was, scientific research used with an online questionnaire. Now, there's a problem with that always. We'll talk about whenever you are doing research that involves self-report, you have to take into consideration whether or not the respondents are actually being completely authentic and truthful in their responses. But this is the way the paper was introduced. It says little is known about what motivates breeders and what breeding practices they adopt. Less still is known about whether breeders prioritize practices that ensure that puppies are suitable as companion animals. So even though this is a very recent study, it was able to get an online survey of about 275 participants. It did not ferret out a wide range of specifics. The majority of the respondents viewed their dog breeding as a hobby, and they continue the practice of breeding because of their love and admiration of a particular type of dog. It was a big relief to me to know that a lot of what came through, albeit in a self-report, like I said, that the respondents sought to produce quote unquote healthy companion animals. The respondents also asserted that they were committed to the long-term health of the puppies that they're producing. And as far as a specific motivation, money was really not initially a huge factor, but the longer an individual stays in that world, money becomes more important for different reasons. So, of course, it wouldn't always because of a profit, and there is a possibility of making profit there, but because if you're breeding animals ethically, there's going to be a lot of expenses.
Sure, that makes sense.
If you're going to do it right, it's going to cost money.
Yeah, but I can see like with anything, if you have some sort of side hustle, even if it's a hobby, you start to probably live within the means of whatever income that presents, and then you want to keep it going, right?
Yeah, that's a great example of how there are so many factors that can be involved. The study also found that there was a very distinct delineation between breeders. And I love this quote: those who breed under an industry code and those who do not. So there is published editorial material that indicates that breeders actually do set health and welfare traits as priorities when they engage in these breeding practices. The problem is there isn't a lot of clear research in this area that really drives down into the data. And this is just one small example from Australia, as opposed to all of like North America and into Western Europe, where it is such a big deal.
Right. And there are ethical, this is just my term, but ethical breeders that exist.
That's a real term.
Okay.
That is an ethical breeder.
There's ethical everything, ethical porn, ethical,
yes.
But these people do exist, of course. And the way that I was sort of conceptualizing ethical breeders is that when they understand the science and they start to care less about the purity and more about the ways in which dogs can be bred to be healthy and that breed can have longevity, in a good way. Speaking about Dalmatians earlier, so this is a really good example, is that the Dalmatians were so overbred. They have a number of problems, like 30% of them are deaf. We had one of ours, which 1 in 3 of ours was actually deaf, but they also were so overbred and very specific for a look, right? The spots is like always
Right.
that they actually lost a gene in their overbreeding that would keep a certain toxin from building up in their bladder. And so their bladders were bursting. It was awful, like
Wow.
awful deaths. And they could not urinate. And so a geneticist figured this out, introduced a different but very similar breed, one dog into lineage, and it brought that gene back. So for that lineage of Dalmatians. But the thing is, every puppy that came from that one specific dog that was not a Dalmatian, the regulatory committees would not say that they were Dalmatians. They wouldn't recognize them as Dalmatians, even though you could not tell from, the outside. And here he was really working towards making the breed healthy and the way that they're supposed to be, kind of righting a wrong, if you will. So really interesting stuff.
I'm blown away. I didn't know that at all. I mean, I was aware of like the long and tall boys, that sort of body shape of longer but taller, long-legged dogs with like the long but thick head, that they have hip problems and tail problems. And I mean, a friend of mine's wonderful elderly dog in his last years just had that terrible hip dysplasia, and he was in so much pain. It was such a sweet dog. It's just heartbreaking. But let's get into some more definitions. Purpose breeding is very much a big term in this world. Purpose breeding is where an animal's line is bred to perform at least what is initially to be a very specific task, like hunting game, working as a service dog, or herding livestock. And of course, there would be a very specific list of those qualities that are needed. For example, the dachshund, or the wiener dog, as I like to call them, or long lowboy, as they're called in memes, was bred to hunt badgers. And their shape is definitively to be able to get into the badger burrow. And despite being very small, they can be very, very fierce with the badgers that they're chasing. So dogs became the word breeds because they were specifically bred for these special abilities that are offered to enhance humans' lives. So some other examples.
I'm having a reaction to that. I'm like, why are we even hunting badgers? And foxes and,
Well, but that's fox hunting that's a whole different thing. Like, that is a sport.
Yeah.
Badgers were, dangerous on farm property and could destroy crops and stuff like that. So they served a purpose. Those two things, I don't think we would kind of look at in the same way.
So different ways to interpret enhancing humans' lives.
Yeah, good point. I mean, other examples would include herd dogs that, are trained and comfortable with nipping at livestock's legs. Guard dogs that develop a very clear, concrete, innate understanding of what is their property. It's their territory, it's their humans' property, and almost like GPS, like they know exactly what is their area to protect. And one of my favorites is like the development of Chihuahuas were bred to keep tarantulas out of the house in Mexico, I guess by barking at them and then trembling until the spiders just noped out. But I mean, I love Chihuahuas. They're very cute. I used to think that I didn't like them. And I lived with one for several years, and like, it was the best dog ever. It was so awesome.
You know what my brain just did with that sentence? It saw Mexico, and in my head, I saw Chupacabra. But that's also my favorite cryptid. So
that is your favorite cryptid?
It is. I don't know why, because I really think they exist. I think
that is the one with the least amount of anecdotal evidence.
I know.
Of all the cryptids you could choose, you choose the Chupacabra. My God.
Man, I just went off on a off-ramp quick. Okay.
That's a little more my territory.
I know.
So then we go on to ethical versus unethical breeding. And unethical breeders within this paradigm, they are known to have very little concern about the welfare of the animals. They're thought to be primarily motivated by money. These breeders do not consider the complexities of the animals that they are breeding. They breed genetic traits that the dogs can pass on to their litters, much like you were talking about. Breeders like this don't monitor, engage in the appropriate and indicated levels of medical care or safe and appropriate housing. And of course, on the other side of the spectrum would be a responsible breeder or ethical breeder who's not only the opposite of what I just talked about, but also somebody who's informed and stays on top of the most recent and extensive information about the particular dog that they breed. They see themselves as individuals who are helping animals excel in what would be considered a career, like showing, hunting, working, or as a companion. So one of the qualities that they purport to exhibit is very good planning of breeds rather than the unethical and unending broods produced by those that don't place the animal welfare first. So basically, they're the Bene Gesserit of the dog world.
What is that?
Oh my gosh.
Or who is
Bene
that?
Gesserit, like in Dune, they're the women that are like running, they're the shadow government that's running the whole thing. They're guiding the development of humans' history of, okay, I can see your eyes glazing over. You're not interested.
I know this is very timely because there's a new Dune, but right. I have to totally cop to the fact that I am a terrible David Lynch fan because I've never seen Dune.
Oh, I think I love the first book. I mean, of course, everybody, I saw it multiple times when it first came out. And of course, I had to sit with friends and go, okay, this is what's happening. This is what's happening.
Oh, like, you're that guy? No.
Well, because it's really hard to understand.
It's confusing,
at least the newer versions really kind of make sense. But anyway, off.
Yep.
Anyway, breeding versus puppy mills. So the next distinction would be an extension of what I just went over, is that breeding is a careful and well-planned activity. And they want to preserve as much as they can, as well as protect a certain breed, versus a puppy mill operation that focuses on a for-profit model of producing the sort or the flavor of the month dog breed that sells for the highest dollar, which is a horrible practice. It's terrible for the dog. It leads to incredible rates of abandonment of dogs. Like the more popular a dog is, people buy it because it's popular. They don't understand the special needs. And then they end up in specialty
rescues,
which, the stats there, at least over COVID, there's been incredible numbers of animals getting adopted from rescues, which has been wonderful because people have been home. But it would be lovely if we could get to a place where we're not just producing these poor animals.
Sure.
That then get abandoned
as accessories.
Right. And I understand that there's a spectrum between these two extremes we're talking about. But of course, this kind of horrific situation is the one that will get the media attention. And I'm glad it does. At least it definitely does get a lot of attention out here in Southern California when they bust these rings up. I mean, it's certainly horrifically newsworthy when you see these. And I'll watch them. I'll be on Facebook Watch scrolling through videos. And of course, the algorithm knows that I am a complete sucker for any kind of animal video. And when you see these poor, starving dogs that are rescued from horrific situations, it's just awful.
I know.
Which that's another phenomenon too, with people that think that they're going to be breeders and they actually have like a predilection to become hoarders. And so they get overwhelmed with the amount of animals that are being produced in their house, and they can't take care of them, and they can't dispose of them. They can't feed them.
Right.
And, people walk in, animal welfare walks into these houses of horrors that are full of animal corpses. Very, very sad.
Yes. So the police department that I worked for, we had an animal control department that was literally within our building. So we worked very closely with them. And we had a kennel in the back. So when they would do rescues, they would bring the animals there. And I remember one incident where, I don't know what the situation was, but all of these puppies were basically they got wind of these puppies being kept in the bed of a truck with just a piece of plywood over the top. And so they rescued this litter of puppies. And I told my husband, we had 2 dogs at the time. And I said, oh my God, there's 2 more left. And they're so cute. Like, you have to come take a look. Let's get one. And so he comes down and we're looking at them, and it's a brother and sister, and they're both staring at us. And he's like, all right, we'll just take both of them. They were just so sweet, brother and sister. And we named them Lenny and Briscoe. So Lenny Briscoe from Law and Order. And they were just adorable mutts. And
good for you for that rescue.
So sweet. But, I think it's very easy to conceptualize, the people who are breeding dogs for money, who might not know what the hell they're doing. They're just maybe even just jumping online, or maybe it's something that they're just getting information from friends about. But also, I'm thinking about the fact that that's for the regular consumer. But when we pull back and we look at these dog shows, the money-making industry that it is,
right,
with all of the people that watch, all the people that participate, all of the spectators, and the people involved higher up that are turning a blind eye to, some of these problematic things that we're talking about. So that's something else that I have kind of spinning plate when we're talking about all this. But the BBC did a documentary called Pedigree Dogs Exposed in 2008. And that really rocked the industry, but rocked viewers and spectators of what is going on behind the scenes. It did lead to 3 different independent inquiries into dog breeding and the formation of finally an advisory council over there. So the Advisory Council on the Welfare Issues of Dog Breeding. When I say over there, I mean the UK. And the Kennel Club is the equivalent to our American Kennel Club out here, who does all of the registry and lineage checking and all of that. And of course, they put out a statement. They were very defensive. They were kind of on the television circuit after this doc came out. And basically, they said, they're showing the worst of the worst, and there's not very much to worry about here. But it really, really highlighted some of the horrific impacts of breeding for looks, for particularly showing dogs and what dogs were winning, and how they had really morphed these dogs into like what one person in the documentary calls mutants. He says, this is just a parade of mutants, which
wow,
is so interesting. It's harsh. Yeah. He was a little harsher, but the documentary is very difficult to watch. I mean, we'll elaborate on some of these controversies later, but definitely a warning if you go Googling or YouTubing this. So I have that in the back of my mind. I think I want to switch gears to legal as well and kind of look at the criminality of what animal cruelty is, so we can further this conversation to say, what is it? What isn't it? How does law enforcement sort of play into this? With this section, Scott and I just want to give special thanks to Detective Molly for being our subject matter expert and providing us
the best. She's amazing.
Providing us with some of her materials and expertise to talk about this. Animal cruelty can be on so many different levels, a lot of different things. It can be the pet owner who is being cruel to their own dog in their home, and the behavior is relatively hidden. It could be ritualistic, or patterns of behavior with disturbed individuals. It could be other type of ritualistic animal sacrifice, which we'll get to, and all the way up to things we hear about that are pretty high profile, like organized animal fighting rings for profit, gambling, essentially. Or some would definitely agree the breeding world as well is cruel in and of itself. Generally, as I was talking about with my own department that I worked for, animal service units in various jurisdictions work really closely with law enforcement. So it could be like what I was describing, where we literally had them inside of our police department. Not every jurisdiction has that luxury. So they might have their local, usually there's like a county animal services department that they have a good working relationship with, or they could have a full-on task force if they're a big enough department where there are detectives assigned to these specific cases. You get subject matter experts that know how to document the evidence and investigate these crimes. And they have DAs assigned to these types of cases to know how to prosecute them, because they are pretty specialized. Against all the other crime out there that happens to humans, this is not as prolific as that and doesn't get the attention because you don't have a victim that can speak. Well, some dogs and cats speak. I watch enough TikTok to know that. But so here are, at least for California, some of the most prosecutable types of crimes or categories. So the biggie is aggravated animal abuse or cruelty. That's what the penal code section is. So for a felony, that would be any maiming or mutilation or torture of a live animal, or the intentional killing of an animal. And the law specifically requires you to be able to prove the acts that were committed against the animal were willful, unlawful, malicious, and intentional. So that could be difficult to prove. Detective Molly told us, the proof often comes in the form of the injury, being able to document the injury. And it's across the board. It's shootings, stabbings, blunt force trauma. And when they're prosecuting these cases, they always have a veterinarian to come in and document the injuries. So really only a vet can document this and determine the injury for a prosecutable case. A misdemeanor of this would be something like starvation or leaving a dog in a hot car to where the potential is death. And it is certainly cruel. Another separate crime would be gross neglect. So this would be the basic needs of the animal are not being met: insufficient water, food, shelter, or things like flea or tick infestation, finding that flies, they have fly bites all over them or other types of insect bites, embedded collars. So they just slap a collar on a dog and the dog grows, or it's too tight and it just gets embedded into their skin. All of those fall under neglect. There's also a separate category of crime for mutilation, specifically. It's just what it sounds like. I'm not going to go into that. And then there's also this issue of animal sacrifice. So animal sacrifice can be done for a number of reasons. And if done for a sanctioned religious or sacred reason, the act is actually protected by the First Amendment. So the most common that they find are Kaparut, which is a ritual practiced by some Jews on the eve of Yom Kippur, where they take a chicken and wave it over the head of somebody, and then the chicken is slaughtered. Or the other one is Santeria. So for all the 40-year-old white people out there, you can queue up your Sublime CD now. It's probably our best reference to Santeria.
That's very, I mean, I actually have a bizarre experience or connection to that. Santeria and one of its parent religions, or Yoruban religion, Ifa, also practices, not regularly, but when you're in a bad space or things are not going, then they will encourage the sacrifice of a chicken or a goat. And I had a roommate years ago that was a practitioner of Ifa. I wasn't very familiar with it at the time. And I remember coming home and seeing like a single feather in the corner of the bathtub with a splotch of blood. And I was
Lord.
like, what is going on? Please tell me this was a pillow fight that went wrong or something. And my roommate said, well, no, this has never happened before, but I'm in a space and I was told by the priest that I needed to do this in order to get things right. I was like, okay.
Oh, cool. Could you given me a heads up or?
Yeah, well, or clean better next time and don't tell me.
At least you didn't do it while you were home. You're like, what is going on in there?
Yeah, exactly.
And then we have what we touched on before, the illegal gambling of animal fighting. And the two absolutely most common are cockfighting and dog fighting.
Yeah.
So we're going to touch on a very famous case of that. But of course, we also have a section in our penal code for bestiality, which
it's not allowed.
We could do a whole episode on that for sure.
Yeah, that would need to be a whole other thing. And also about the legality from state to state about it, which just is mind blowing about how bestiality is treated in different states. Like in some states, it's like, nothing wrong here. We don't really care, which is very interesting because it like kind of reflects, aside from the fact that it's a paraphilia on the part of the human that's involved. It's like you're taking advantage of this sentient being, like it's terrible.
Well, and that's the reason that it's illegal. It's essentially forced sexual contact with a living being. And oh man, I could go on about the cognitive distortions. I've worked with some clients in that community, if I want to call it that. I mean, they definitely see themselves as a community.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. And they don't refer to it as bestiality. They have their own terminology and perceptions and ideals of how animals give them consent and how they don't. And it's fascinating.
Okay. But we digress. That is not the subject of
Shiloh,
what we're talking about
reel
here.
it back. What's very interesting with this is we got a little bit of information from Detective Molly about the crossover with abuse against animals and abuse against people by the same perpetrator. And specifically, there was a study done in 2017 where 89% of women with companion animals who were in an abusive relationship reported that their animals were threatened, harmed, or killed by their abuser.
Yeah.
And essentially, I mean, this is about the pet being an extension of that victim and just another way to harm them or inflict pain and really show power and control over them.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the running theme through a lot of this. Not today's episode, not necessarily to that extent. I mean, certainly not to that extent, but on a clinical level, all of us look at the world around us as varying levels of extensions of ourselves and how we interrelate with it. But there is a way that can become much more predominant than it's supposed to be. And that can lead to challenges in interpersonal relationships when you see everything around you as just an extension of yourself. And people can over-relate to animals as well, right, in lieu of putting work on relationships with other humans. That can happen too.
Yeah, I thought this was such an interesting point because there is so much research coming out about other acts of violence and the role of the propensity to domestic violence or intimate partner violence, which is going to be a huge topic of our next episode. But even like when they look at mass casualty incidents, specifically like school shooters, it's a really high percentage of them who also commit acts of violence against animals.
Yes.
Generally cats and dogs. But it's a fascinating area of research that is really kind of up and coming at this point. It's like, what is going on in these backgrounds of these perpetrators and looking at the pattern of violence in different ways.
Yeah. And you said it earlier too, it just hits different. It hits us different. I'm a professional. I've seen a lot of rough stuff in the time that I've been working in this field. And it surprises me what hits me and what doesn't hit me. Yeah. This is something that really hits me. Cruelty against kids, cruelty against animals. It just guts me.
Yeah, absolutely. So probably the most high profile example of animal fighting rings is that of Michael Vick. And to remind you folks, in 2007, Michael Vick was at the top of the NFL. He was the Atlanta Falcons' star quarterback. However, all of that quickly came crashing down when his organized dogfighting operation was discovered and he was prosecuted for that. So I don't know if people really know what really happened. Essentially, once law enforcement got wind of this and the feds served their search warrant on this property that he owned in Virginia, they discovered that this property was being used to basically stage, house, and train pit bulls for fighting. Several kennels were discovered on the property, as well as other staples of big dogfighting rings, which I had zero knowledge of. There's a thing called a rape stand, which is a contraption to position dogs into forced mating. So rape stands were found on the property, as well as electric treadmills for dogs. I don't know if that's to like get them in shape. I don't know if that's because they can't go out and walk all these dogs in the neighborhood or someone would suspect something. So they're getting their exercise indoors, maybe just to keep them conditioned, perhaps. But when the property was searched, 50 live animals were recovered, and it was eventually confirmed that at least 30 pit bulls had been killed on site.
Oh my gosh.
During fighting. There was bloody carpet present on the property. And it turns out that the operation had been quote unquote sponsored by a criminal organization called Bad News Kennels since about 2002. So this was going on for 5 years, and participants would bring their dogs from all across the country. The investigation revealed that the grand prize winners would collect thousands of dollars. This was a huge, massive operation.
Right. I'm kind of flabbergasted by it because I'm now remembering when all of it came down. And thankfully, there's not a lot of video. You could find it if you wanted to. It's not worth watching about how brutal these fights are. They're just incredibly violent. Now, Vic initially denied knowledge of what was happening. And then he tried blaming it on his family before finally pleading guilty and earning an 18-month prison sentence. And, the thing that he says that he regrets most about it when interviewed is mainly that the case affected his chances of getting into the Hall of Fame. And he said,
poor guy.
I know, poor thing. He said, it's going to impact everything, but it was all self-inflicted. I was young. I didn't have any guidance. I don't use this as an excuse. I could have said no. I could have made those right decisions.
Well,
okay.
Yeah. It doesn't surprise me. He's come around or whatever. And there's been talk about his quote unquote rehabilitation. Just a month ago, actually, December, the last surviving dog rescued from the operation passed away. And his name was Frodo. And he lived a very happy life afterwards, loved by very good people after being rescued. They estimated that he was probably about 15 years old when he passed. But yeah, he was one of the 48 dogs that they got out of there.
Well, Vic was released from prison in May of 2009. And then that July, he was conditionally reinstated by the NFL. And then the following month, he signed a 2-year deal with the Philadelphia Eagles. He made a great comeback on the football field, although his public image remained tarnished. He finally retired from professional football in 2017. I don't know where you go from that. I will say this. He may have a good PR person that says you need to lay low for a long time.
Right.
If ever, right. Or just somebody maybe talked to him very bluntly and said, you're not going to get any, you're not going to be getting any opportunities to be on television. I mean, you're kind of done.
Yeah.
When you reach this level of criminality, especially like the abject cruelty that happens in dog fights, it is.
Yes.
And clearly, like, folks, just as a reminder, we're talking about a wide spectrum here. We're not implying that like Westminster Dog Show is like putting people up to fight dogs.
There's not secret fights happening in the basement.
There are not. There's no basement at the Westminster Dog Show.
Or the Alamo.
The point is like the overarching thing is about the spectrum of how people view our animal companions here in today's society. And that to me is fascinating, because my experience of the people that I do know that are participating in dog shows, you can have debate about how they got to where they are and what, about the breeding practices. But it's clear that these people really love their dogs. I mean, they are.
Oh, sure.
They are very much invested in the relationship that they have with these animals and the care that they give them, versus someone that will put an animal in a dangerous situation fighting and sees the dog as nothing but an object.
Exactly.
Is like a non-sentient, non-feeling object. Or that you get to the point where I know you have feelings, you're in pain because you're fighting and you're getting bitten on the neck, and I don't care because I have a chance to win $10,000.
Right. Yeah. Right. And it's not like other rings don't exist and this was the only one, but I think it's just such a fucked up story for someone with that much influence, with kids, with other athletes looking up to him, to be involved in torturing animals in that way.
And why?
Right? Like as if you needed the money.
As if you needed the money. Like, and that's something that like, I don't even have enough information to analyze that. It's somebody that's alive and he's still active and, go live your life and don't hurt anybody. But how did you get there? That blows my mind. But switching gears, let's go to strictly dog shows. The big one that we all know is the Westminster Dog Show. It's been around for about 144 years. And so obviously with the numbers, dogs really took off formally in the Victorian age. So about 150 years ago is when this all started. Modern dog shows first began more than 150 years ago. And here, Neil Pemberton, in an article that we found, really kind of describes the process of how this really exploded as a phenomenon.
Yeah. So the first modern dog show that we know of took place in England in June 1859. And as an added attraction, it was taking place at an annual cattle show. And it only had 2 breeds, setters and pointers, which of course would be necessary for the average farmer to have. So it's kind of like an overlapping interest there. But by the end of the century, of course, it had morphed into something completely different as a very popular pastime, particularly with the richer classes who could afford the luxury and time of breeding specific dogs just for the sake of doing so and the competition. And this singular development had significant impact on what we know as canine breeding.
So by the end of the 1860s, England's National Dog Show included over 700 dogs and 20,000 visitors that were paying admission to be part of viewing this competition. And as these shows were taking off, thankfully, a regulatory board sprang into existence to organize rules and the expectations of the competitors and lock down on some of these practices that they were really starting to see how quickly it was happening, but like trying to breed without sort of any guidance or anything. So, of course, the organizations had splinters and in-house disagreements leading to separation between various boards, because that's what humans do, is screw things up.
Right. But from the beginning, judging the dogs was quite controversial. It's funny because when I was watching Best in Show today, my husband walked in and he's like, what makes that person an expert on like judging that dog?
Yeah.
Like, and that's true. Like, what qualifies a person to be a judge? And how would you even evaluate their integrity? On top of the issue with finding a trusted and qualified judge, competitors were now using techniques to enhance the dog's appearance, like trimming the ears, dyeing the coat, or maybe even a quick substitution of animals at shows versus competitions. Like, oh, we'll use a double for Trixie because this isn't a competition, while the real Trixie is competing like 3 states away.
Yeah. And that was really happening. That was happening a lot more. That's why these regulatory boards had to kind of spring into action and keep really detailed records. This led to the development of what are called stud books that validate pedigrees and identities, where owners could record the lineage of their individual dog or kennel. And so all this rapid development, the idea of the perfect dog or breed became a real controversy as people started considering aesthetics versus the health of the animal. Breeds were changing and not always for the better. There's a quote from a veterinarian's publication in the late 1880s expressing concern for what would be called lap dogs, or dogs that engaged in very, very little physical activity and were just sort of passive little pets for rich older families.
Yeah, like I said before, basically accessories. This one veterinarian, J.H. Steele, he wrote about a toy dog, quote, whose stomach refuses all but the most delicate morsels artificially prepared, whose limbs can scarcely support his weight, whose natural atmosphere is that of a close and heated room, and who has become petulant and snappish through the enervating influence of his surroundings, end quote. Sounds like me during winter break.
Yes.
Some vets also went on to assert that these pure breeds were no healthier than feral street dogs, which that's a weird comparison to make.
It is. But I mean, well, it's also 150-year-old observation. So, but of course, there will continue to be controversy. And it's clear that overall, the evolution of these shows integrally changed the lives of dogs in society. And that is probably a good thing. I really do think in many ways it was a good thing. Dog owning for reasons other than hunting and farm work became fashionable, and it then sped up the trend of dogs becoming well-treated domestic companions throughout British society. So it led to the development of a different kind of relationship between animal and humans, which of course, I'm sure there are plenty of people out there that would debate that. PETA is, of course, completely all against this and doesn't believe in that at all.
So that's when they went from like a working animal to a companion and part of the family.
Right.
But also there's this sort of other higher echelon that is involved in this world of breeding and show dogs and all of that.
Right. So, and it became something like in an agrarian and hunting society, which you were before, mass production of food. If you were out on a farm, your dog was a part of the family, if you used it for hunting. So there was this sort of understanding that your dog had these duties that it performed, and it was like maybe your kids played with it and stuff. But if you were not in that strata of society, why would you have a dog? So then it sort of morphs into a different level. It's not just having the most stately bloodhounds for royalty. It's like all these other breeds that could be companions for humans. Pretty cool.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
If you're thinking about starting a podcast, let us tell you about Anchor.
First off, it's free, and you can record and edit your show through your computer or phone, or import your show from whatever recording software you already use.
Anchor will then distribute your show for you so it can be heard on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen.
And probably the best part, you can start making money with no minimum listenership.
It's everything you need to start a podcast from start to finish in one place, and it was a super easy switch for us.
Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. That's anchor.fm.
So what, if anything, do we know as far as dog breeders and psych profiles for them?
Well, we can really only extrapolate from really scant research of what I've talked about before. There can be an altruistic hobby-related interest or drive, as I mentioned previously, or, there can be, some more less savory ones. People can be driven by competition. Now, that can also apply to any animal breeder who engages in competition, a passion for the animals and their well-being, as well as the accolades that the winning animal can get. I mean, within that particular division, there would be a spectrum of motivation. And I always think of the really wonderful stage parents that I met when I was a casting director. I would meet some people that were great. And they were realistic with their kids about the business. And the kids said, I don't want to do this anymore. Done deal. Parents were like, nope, we're done. They can play sports or they can be home doing their homework. We don't have to do this. I'm not going to be one of those crazy stage people. And of course, I saw the opposite of it as well. I saw people that forced their kids into doing these things, always hoping their kid was going to be the next little star. Of course, now the difference here is that you can't directly, verbally, and profoundly communicate with an animal to know if they really want to do this. Although we would hope that most showers would be pretty invested in the emotional health of their animals as well. And look, there is a very special relationship that develops between animals and their companions where it can seem a little telepathic. And maybe on some level, animal instincts understanding human or adapting their behaviors around it. I think there is a level of communication that's really good. And again, for the shows, these dogs are treated very well. They're not getting like people food treats that are going to kill them, like the lap dog.
Right.
They're getting the best of the best food that's really geared towards their health and the shininess of their coat and other things like that.
So this kind of is starting to remind me of, any type of performer, because even though sort of the spotlight is on the dog, I wonder if the handler feels like this is a performance for them too. And we've talked about that. I mean, we did like a whole beauty pageant episode. And is there pieces that overlap there as far as the human believing their attention's on them?
I think so. Look, this is anecdotal and I'm drawing a parallel, but I do think that there is some stage mom or pageant parent there, method of relationships there. Some people are definitely living out vicariously through a projection of their identity. I'm making a generalization that's only specific to a few people, because I do think that that's actually equally balanced by the level of community that these shows bring. I mean, like, this is a lifestyle. It's like sports parents and sports families, and it brings people together and they're passionate about it. And they're coming together for these conventions, and they have a network of social interactions with people around the world that are positive, I think. I mean, certainly everything points to them being positive. But of course, there's always going to be bad apples in the bunch. And that has led to some of the crimes that we've talked about, or not that we haven't talked about yet. We're going to give examples. But going back to that idea of the stage parent living out vicariously, I'm referring to a character or a type of individual that is prone to demand special treatment for their child. And this term can also apply to the individual when they've put inappropriate pressure on their child to succeed, maybe for those means of vicarious living. But we're not talking about kids here. We're talking about dogs. That being said, there is a term that we use called anthropomorphization, where we place human characteristics onto animals, and we assume that animals have the same kinds of intelligence that we do. And animals are wildly smart, but they're smart in very different ways, cognitively, from humans. So if you have a different cognitive structure, you're going to have a different emotional structure as well. Nothing bad. It's just different,
Yes. And dogs cannot consent to sex. Circling back to bestiality.
We're going back, and we're not saying that we know anybody that would do that, because I don't. I'm just going to be very clear.
Gosh. Well, who I would like to know more about is people who participate in these shows and who are not successful. They're not the top breeders, or they're not the top handlers, or don't always have winning dogs, because you hear about like these big lineages of winning dogs over and over again, but that leaves a pretty big percentage of people that aren't really successful in the competitions. And I wonder what their experience is like.
I do too. I don't think, and there's nothing, I haven't been able to find anything out there. I mean, it's sort of,
this is very niche.
It is, it's very niche, but I do remember like there was this weird phenomenon in pageants in the South, because you had to be able to get to like Miss Alabama. You had to go through all of these, at least one, if not more, regional pageants to get to that.
Sure.
And maybe there's a same thing for dogs, that you get stuck in sort of the lower level
Oh, I'm sure. I think for any sport or
don't know.
competition, it's.
I'm going to try and
like that.
I'm going to try and get Jake to come on our next Get Vocal and maybe explain some of this stuff to us.
If he's not all mad at us after listening to this episode.
Please don't be mad at me. We're talking about the dark side. I'm not talking about you, I promise. But that is also not to say that some of these breeders are not driven by money, because some of them are. You know, how much a dog breeding business that is specifically just a dog breeding business can make, it depends on the quality of its dogs, how many litters it breeds in a year. A high-end breeder may hopefully only allow about 4 litters a year, because although dogs are capable of doing back-to-back breeding, it's very, very hard
that's awful.
on the dogs, and it's not looked upon very well. But they can sell the pups for up to $2,500 each. And that's not even, that's just, I'm generally speaking. I mean, there are some,
that's not a show level.
Yeah. I mean, it can go up to like thousands of dollars. I mean, yes. I know, like, especially right now, French bulldogs are like a big thing. And it's even to the point of like Lady Gaga's dog walker.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Like
dogs
getting
stolen.
Put in the hospital after the dogs were stolen. It's terrible.
Yeah, I know someone that just flew to Florida to go pick up their French bulldog.
Oh, wow. Look, when a breeder is at that level of breeding and maybe even running a kennel, they can break even or they can make money. But the breeders with great reputations, they can generate a substantial profit without being like a full-time business, because they are known to be ethical and responsible, and they've done great work in creating a responsible network throughout this community. The breeders with a great reputation may make that substantial profit, but the majority of people shooting for this will not. Because taking on the responsibility of breeding at this level means owning several dogs, maybe hiring part-time staff, having professional equipment, as well as going to these paid events. So the more successful breeders are those that have been able to create and maintain those strong relationships in this world, where they are then more likely to interact with those that may eventually become customers, or through word of mouth, someone says, hey, if you want this particular breed of dog, I know this wonderful couple that does it. They're very ethical. Their dogs are wonderful. They don't have any breeding problems. Because that's very different from the puppy mills, that the dog can look really great, but basically have a lot of behavior problems because of bad breeding.
Well, behavior and medical, definitely.
Right.
So looking at really the main problems or controversies with pedigree type breeding, really it comes down to 2 big issues. And this is where the Pedigree Dogs Exposed documentary takes a stance and says that when you have this type of pedigree breeding, the pools of breeds are getting so narrow that it causes 2 big problems. First, the genetic pools are so incredibly diminished that they're essentially putting the viability of entire breeds at risk. So you're running out of dogs to keep making more puppies if you make it more and more exclusive. And additionally with this, they view the close breeding as non-problematic. So, I mean, they even interview this man who runs a show and talks about, like, is there any problem with mother to son breeding? And he's kind of like, meh. It doesn't seem to be problematic so far. And they ask him, like, well, would you have sex with your daughter? I mean, that's a little far and different. Like, I know they're trying to be controversial, or at least they're ignoring the issue of this really close breeding. And so they've tried to put, like with some of the online registries where you can go and see what dog you're purchasing and what its lineage is, they've worked out like a percentage to where you want them to be far enough apart in their lineage and as relatives. And so they say, like, below 5% is good, whereas like a mother-son would be like 25%.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. So they're trying to enact some sort of ways in which buyers can have a little bit of information about the genetic pool of the parents of the dogs. But they say that the second really big issue is that when you're breeding for looks, it is leaving dogs with exaggerating features that are disabling. So you have the skull structure of dogs being changed so drastically that they can't breathe, or that it's creating folds for infections. The Shar-Pei, that was one example where people will say, oh, well, with the Shar-Pei, I forget what type of animal that they would either be involved with hunting or fighting with. And they would say that it's like channels to have the blood move away from their eyes when they were engaged in this. And then they show you a picture of this dog from 150 years ago, and it didn't have any of that. Like, it just got exaggerated over time because those were the dogs that were winning. Those were the ones that were looking more desirable and different. And then they start creating that. And the differences in the skull structure and all of that is just, it's really, really disturbing when you're seeing these side by sides.
Especially for particular breeds like that.
Yeah.
There are certain breeds that really haven't changed a lot over 100 years. And then there are other ones that, I think of a lot of the dogs with the breathing problems with the like tiny little restricted noses.
The pugs, the bulldogs. Yeah, exactly. And as well as like the other medical issues that are happening, not necessarily because of like skull structure or something like that, but the inbreeding is causing these horrible neurological conditions where dogs are just having seizures and in pain. One condition that essentially they said the dog's brain is too big for the size of its skull now. It's like putting a size 5 foot or a size 8 foot into a size 5 shoe. Just awful, awful stuff. Cardiac problems, the issues I was talking about, the Dalmatians, deafness, all of that. According to PETA, the overbreeding leaves approximately 1 in 4 purebred dogs with serial congenital defects. So it's been reported in some journalistic investigations that a number of kennel owners whose litters were registered to the AKC here in the US, and many of them inspected by the organization, had been arrested on charges of animal cruelty in the past.
Oh,
so it's sort of catching up.
That's disheartening.
It's very disheartening. On one hand, I'm like, good, at least it's being investigated and discovered and hopefully causing a deterrent. And Mike Chilinsky, one of the owners cited in this particular report, he was sentenced to 5 years in prison on 91 counts of animal cruelty and neglect in 2012. And he had been essentially responsible for 161 severely malnourished Malamutes. Yep. They were in small cages, living off their own feces. And the police reported that when they did the search of the property, seeing dead dogs just stacked outside the kennels.
So thankfully, that is very rare.
Yeah, of course.
That child ain't right.
Yeah.
That's clearly, that's like psychopathic behavior, right? Mm-hmm. Like that just total disregard. I don't have the words to describe it.
Yeah, definitely.
Look, I know wonderful people that are working in this environment and they have a passion for the care of their companions. And there are things that we have to talk about this. Like, this isn't reflective of everybody in that environment, thankfully. Right. But these sort of horrific incidents really show that it's not a homogenized group of people that are engaging in these. There are really bad apples that see it as an opportunity. And clearly that's motivated by greed. You don't breed at that level with that level of carelessness and cruelty unless you're trying to make money, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it is. It is a big outlier and rare case, but I think still important to mention. So more particularly to showing and dog shows, some of the controversies over the years are sort of juicy tidbits of things that have happened. PETA is always trying to infiltrate and get in front of the audience here in order to protest and make their statements. And the one in 2010 at the Westminster Dog Show, PETA members Dana Sylvester and Hope Round, right when the Best in Show dog was announced and right when the dog is to be put up on the pedestal and presented with the trophy, they walked onto the ring and held up signs, and one sign said "Mutts rule," and the other sign said "Breeders kill shelter dogs' chances." So they of course were charged with criminal trespass, and PETA said the women acted on their own accord, but they absolutely supported their actions. So this stuff happens from time to time. It does in these types of arenas.
I think it's also important to look at, PETA does not have completely clean hands themselves. They are an organization with a perspective on things, and that is their focus, but they don't always practice what they preach. And they have a very hardcore line that they are pushing all the time. I guess within an organization, you have to push the hard line in order to stay relevant. But Look, the reality is that while they have some excellent points and goals with their organization, they are really very flexible in how they define caring for animals at their adoption centers. So their adoption centers have had staggeringly high euthanasia rates as compared to other facilities. Mm-hmm. And they state on their website that this is due to the poor condition in which the animals are delivered to them. Like they're saying,
the worst of the worst come to them.
We get the worst of the worst, but I can't find any research to back that up. So are they bringing you the worst of the worst because they're assuming you're going to heal the animal and get them back out to a happy field? I don't know, but it sounds like they have a little bit of cleaning to do on their side of the road as well.
Yeah. The other issue is sort of these elective beauty modifications on dogs that are being done very, prevalently, are the docking or the removing of dogs' tails and cutting of their ears, which is banned in the UK and Australia, but we still do it here. Some US breeders actually have spoken out against the practices, but they say their dogs can't win at the big dog shows with the natural long tails or the floppy ears. They're just not being recognized by judges.
I completely get that because my floppy ears prevented me from being a successful runway model. I know.
No, I'm done something about that.
I should have done something with my floppy ears. I am glad you're saying that because I don't get the practice. It feels like it's just something that's done just for tradition. And probably, my friend Bob has had Dobermans, and They are these amazing, lovely dogs. And they've always had their tails and their full ears, these lovely, sweet, warm brown ears that are so lovely. And all I could think is as good as it looks in a picture aesthetically with the pointy ears, why would you do that?
But why do we value that? Yeah.
I know. I mean, I like Star Trek, but I'm not going to go out and have, Spock ears done.
Well,
so why would we do that to animals?
Removable ones. I know.
I know. Well, I do have the glue-on ones. I'm sure they're here somewhere with my tiny hands.
Jeff Schaefer, who's the vice president of the American Rottweiler Club and actually the husband of an American Kennel Club judge, agreed that there's absolutely a bias against natural dogs on the competition circuit. And he said, quote, "It's worse in some breeds than others. When the first Rottweiler with a tail showed in 2006 back in Florida, there was almost a riot. People were crazy, cursing, yelling, screaming, all kinds of threats. It was ridiculous. There were Facebook wars and friendships ended over it," end quote.
Okay, so that does tell us, that's not necessarily, when he's talking about cursing, screaming, yelling, we don't know if that's with the breeders or the show people. That's maybe the obsessive fans that come to these things. So that could be plenty of dog owners that are just obsessed, like sports fans, right?
Yeah, could be.
That I don't want to put that all on the breeders if we don't know, or the showers if we don't know that they're the ones that are doing it. But that is really strange,
right? For people to lose their minds over it.
Yeah, about something like that instead of looking at let's expand this. But that's all people dig their heels in very much.
Yeah,
and
I know,
this is tradition. This is the way it's always done. And you bite yourself in the ass when you do that too much. Anyway, another case example, a vintage one, because we always love our vintage examples, is in 1895 at the New York Dog Show, 8 toy dogs, Yorkshire Terriers, Japanese Chins, and 2 Cavalier King Charles Spaniels were all found either dead or in their last throes of pain as they died. All dogs died after they were poisoned the morning before the competition. Poisoned. How terrible. And also a painful poison, not I don't know if there's an easy poison you can give a dog or give anybody, but This was brutal. Their deaths made the front page of the New York Times, and the headline read, 8 of Mrs. Sen's pets killed by a miscreant at the dog show. Jealousy believed to be the motive. The veterinarians who tried to save the dogs' lives found that they had been given strychnine, which is very strong poison for vermin control, and it's odorless. It has even been used in the past as that's medicine, but in very, very tiny doses. A quote from that day's edition of the New York Times stated, "Later in the day, Mr. Sen seemed to have an idea of who poisoned his dog, but he refused to say much about the case. Last year at the show, there was a lot of bickering among the owners of the pet dogs about the awarding of the prizes in these classes. There's always some jealousy, and Mr. and Mrs. Sen have been very fortunate in showing dogs that were better than those of other exhibitors. One exhibitor last year, it is said, had written several handwritten threatening letters to Mr. Sen, which that gentleman has now handed over to his lawyer. This piece of news was given to the detectives to work on, and Mr. Sen is confident that the fiend will be caught, and the Kennel Club and the Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals will prosecute. It is generally thought that someone was hired to give the poison, and the $1,000 reward may induce those in secret to tell who the principal was. And unfortunately, the killer or killers were not found.
Oh, interesting. Well, things don't change much in 100 or so years, because mine is also a cold case. And sounds like we might be able to say is the same motives here. But the UK had a canine murder mystery on their hands too in 2015. Now over there, Crufts is the premier dog show in the UK with a very long history of its own, stemming back to 1891. Over 20,000 competitors from 43 countries. It's had its own controversies as well, but it's a much different dog show. There's sort of the traditional part, but there's also this showmanship type categories to it too. Have you ever heard of heel work to music?
No, I have not.
So there's like an agility competition, sort of like a little obstacle course, and then there's heel work to music. People, please YouTube this immediately.
Is it like the dog dancing?
It's dog dancing.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
I saw that because they did an episode on King of the Hill about it that was hilarious.
Oh my God. So I didn't know it was a real thing either. I saw an episode of Sam and Cat on Nickelodeon because my kid loves that, about dog dancing. And these are very elaborate performances, usually. So the handler dresses in the theme of like whatever the music is and whatever the little showmanship piece is about, and the dog. Anyway, I'll let you guys.
We'll put up some links. Yeah.
But mainly the Kennel Club, which I said before is like the AKC here in the US, and the organizer of the Crufts event was very much criticized after the BBC program came out, that Pedigree Dogs Exposed, for allowing the types of breed standards that they do, the judging standards and breeding practices, which, as we have said, has really compromised the health of purebred dogs. And in the UK, this led to a lot of sponsors dropping out, and the BBC even dropping coverage of the event, which I guess if they're going to make a documentary, they got to kind of put their money where their mouth is and also not cover the event that they're, poo-pooing over there. Anyway, in March of 2015, murder struck the Crufts dog show. Jagger, who was an award-winning Irish setter, beautiful dog, had won second place in his breed and had returned home to Belgium with his owners. His brother, Fendara Pot Noodle, had taken first prize.
Cool.
So shortly after returning home, Jagger became ill and the vet was called, but not before he died a very quick yet painful death. And when the autopsy was performed on really this otherwise very healthy 3-year-old, they found cubes of meat in his GI tract that had poison carefully folded inside of it. So someone stuck a piece of poison in there, wrapped it up in meat. So clearly it's murder, right? So his owners were stumped. I mean, the dogs had been watched like a hawk for the entire trip. The only time that they said that the dogs were alone was when they were up on their respective stands or benches at the event where the handlers weren't right there. And soon other reports started coming out of other dogs who had been at the show getting sick as well, but none died. Interestingly, though, Jagger's owners refused to think that it was another competitor, which I thought was really interesting to sort of their dedication and their alliance and their identity with this group, that they really just couldn't let themselves think that the industry had come to that. They thought it was more of like someone from the outside sabotaging, a spectator, a protester, but not a competitor. Which that's the first thing my mind goes to. Like, taking out the kneecap of the competitor.
Yeah, totally win, pulling
right?
a Tanya. Yeah.
Totally. So that happened. And then a couple weeks after the show, a winning Rhodesian Ridgeback, who had taken first prize in his breed, was also back in Belgium. He was from there as well. And his owner was taking him out on a walk. And he was shot multiple times from long range. Somebody with a rifle shot this dog while out on a walk and killed him.
That's
like
awful.
Assassination is happening. This owner also refused to believe it was connected and said this must have just been a mean hunter that hates dogs.
Not buying it. I'm not buying it.
Right?
Yeah.
But back to Jagger. So his toxicology specimens get shipped off to Ghent University and were examined. The Kennel Club then puts out a report, which is the people who sponsor all of this. So this is who the report's coming from. I'm just being super, super skeptical. But they basically say that the findings showed that, quote, Jagger, the Irish setter, tragically died after ingesting fast-acting poison banned in Europe. They had to put that in there. Some 28 hours after attending Crufts. Timelines indicate that poison would almost certainly be eaten in Belgium. So they're saying because of the time of the quick acting poison takes that he was already gone and out of the UK by the time he would have had to ingest this.
Okay.
So the poisons that were used were designed to kill pests and take effect within hours. And they're saying basically it could only been consumed when he was already home. They went on to say, we must conclude that it is inconceivable that he could have been poisoned at Crufts on Thursday, March 5th. And when the dog departed from the show, that's when it probably happened. So they also claim that, the other sick dogs that you are hearing about, they could not be located or confirmed, that none of those cases ever came to fruition. So it all kind of fell apart. And both officials in Belgium and Britain declined to investigate, basically saying the findings show that this might not be malicious or not malicious, not linked to the show.
I'm sorry.
And now it's a cold case. I think there's a serial dog killer in Belgium is what I think is going on.
I think that there's some kind of weird cover up for some reason. Like, why would you deny that? That just doesn't, that all seems very skeevy to me.
Yeah. And the owners, of course they know that it's poison and they're not saying that it wasn't murder, but they were saying, we wonder if this was actually meant for the other dog, the prize-winning dog. Because I think at one point they kind of switched spots when they were up on the stand. And that's the time that they said that they were alone, not under their careful watch. So I don't know. But all the way going back to your case and every one that I read about poisoning at these dog shows, no one ever gets caught.
Well,
but you have 160,000 spectators. You have so many people, but these dogs seem to be on pretty good lockdown.
I think that clearly they're on really good lockdown. I will say this, that dogs are like toddlers unless they are highly trained about food, and there are some people that will train you don't eat unless you get the signal that you're able to eat. But, dogs are also once again, about that idea of animal cognition and animal intelligence. Dogs are sneaky. And if dogs they know where the treats are, so maybe somebody tossed something, but I think that there's more going on. There are other things about dog shows that can connect to other parts of the shady world of betting. Do people place bets on types of shows that they do as horse races?
Sure.
The answer is yes. And there's an ongoing following of the Westminster Dog Show for the betting world, of course. And it indicates that it is possible, at least for that kind of monetary gain or motivation. Now, I don't know if there's necessarily any kind of linkage about go take this dog out so that the one I split odds on is going to, or whatever the term is. I don't even know. It's like sports. I don't know anything about the term. Sorry.
Split odds on. I love it.
Stocks, bets. I don't know. But it is an illustration of the phenomenon being perceived as a worthy of speculation and manipulation.
People bet on anything.
Clear. Yeah. Now, again, from our psych perspective, and a dark observation is that the perpetrator would be another competitor, meaning that an individual that presents as loving and devoted to dogs, but is totally willing to kill another dog in the pursuit of a competitive title. Detective Molly was the one that brought that up. She goes she's not a psychologist, but she's so good as a detective. And she was like, that is the weird little mental twist is you're in this environment, in this milieu, and you supposedly care so much for animals, but you're totally willing to take another one out. There's some real pathology there. And that's a real disregard for life. And it has what we would call those flavors of the dark triad that would include harm to animals as previously described, and also this detachment from animals that aren't yours.
Right.
Because if you don't have a narcissistic extension to anything but the animals that you're taking care of or owning, quote unquote, then you wouldn't have any regard for that other animal's life, right?
Right. Or I jokingly said like the Tonya Harding issue, but if your desire to win overrides the piece of your brain that should be saying you don't hurt another human being, that fits with those flavors.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a great media example of this. I can't help using this as sort of a parallel. Highly recommend this for any of our audience members that have never watched this, but it's a movie version of an actual true crime. The movie is called The Positively True Adventures of the Alleged Texas Cheerleader Murdering Mom. And this was about a woman played brilliantly by Holly Hunter, a woman named Wanda Holloway. She tries to hire a hitman to either kill her daughter's competition for cheerleading or, more chilling, killing both the cheerleader and her mother. Whoa. Wanda assumed that with the other two of them out of the way, that there would be this open path of success for her daughter. And again, that's an example. It's a very dark comedy, but it is based on the true story of what actually happened. And it's going back to that lack of regard for life, unless it's an extension of your identity.
Right. I think to see your daughter win or your dog win.
We have this idea of the relationship that we have with animals, and there's clear indication from the most recent animal behaviorist research about animals actually having emotional connections to their human companions.
Sure.
That is completely there.
Yeah.
But it does lead to other areas of discussion because various societies and cultures throughout history have had very different views of the roles of animals as pets. And I don't like to say pet, I like to say companion. I feel like it's more respectful for the animal. But, I grew up having pets, and there are some animals in sort of like you look back in Egyptian society where a lot of the deities were anthropomorphized combinations of humans and animals. And there were even animals like Bastet, who was always personified as a woman with a cat's head. And that, cats would be mummified and treated with great respect because they were seen as these sort of deities.
As they are, clearly.
As they are, and they know it too. But that's not been consistent throughout history. It certainly is not in there. In some cultures that view animals as, like in gang culture, pit bulls are not seen as pets. They're seen as a status symbol,
right,
to show how badass I am. And they train sometimes their dogs to be aggressive, and those dogs are incredibly strong. They are not as dangerous as they have been promoted to be. There's research that shows they are not.
We've had lovely, lovable teddy bear pit bulls.
Right. And I was really wrong about that. I remember being very concerned for a client and her infant son. And she got really impatient with me and a little testy, rightly so, because I was expressing a very ill-informed perspective on them having a pit bull in the house. Totally ill-informed, totally own it now.
I think, when we were talking about like dogs eating anything, we still have to remember that dogs are animals. And no matter how well you have a relationship with your dog or how well you think you have it trained, they can also go back to very animalistic tendencies. And I think I would, everyone needs to be cautious with a dog around a toddler. We don't need to say which breeds or, stereotype in that way. But I think some people do have a false sense of security sometimes around some certain animals. And it's happened like with police dogs.
Yes.
Super well trained, he's such a great family dog. And then he ends up ripping the arm off of, a toddler in the house. And brutal. It's just brutal. Yeah.
Well, that's another thing that Detective Molly educated me on when we had to take a pet into protective custody and put them in the specialized, temporary care where you're evaluating whether or not this dog can go back to its owner. She educated me on that it is not good for them to stay in these isolated kennels for extended periods of time because all of that socialization that they gained through human contact, that can be lost very quickly. And they can go very much back to exhibiting some more defensive, protective, feral qualities.
I see.
I had no idea, but that's like a very big thing. And clearly because of the specific work that she does, she's more understanding of that. I think also it's just here at the end, it's important to remember that we have had a monumental shift in our understanding about animal cognition and animal intelligence. Like I said, we need to stop judging animal intelligence through a rubric of comparing them to humans, like saying things like dogs can be as smart as a 3-year-old. Well,
yeah. Why are we comparing apples and oranges?
We should not be comparing that at all, because dogs can do a lot of things that a 3-year-old will never be able to do.
Or working with totally different systems and senses. And
exactly. And there's the wonderful documentary, My Octopus Teacher, which I think is fantastic.
Beautiful.
A very, very different type of intelligence and an interaction they have. But we have a lot of assumptions about animals that has shifted over thousands of years and needs to shift and continue to evolve, because animal intelligence is viewed as a combination of skills and abilities that allow animals to live in and adapt to their specific or even specific changes in their environments. They form social groups. And specifically, when we're talking about dogs that are essentially pack or clan animals, it's more and more understood that dogs see their human companions as a leader or the head of their pack.
Sure.
And that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. But, we need to be very careful about the assumptions we make, even on top of that. One of the things that I have as a wackadoodle theory is as much as we anthropomorphize animals, we are also closer in our modern cultures to animals. We train and have more expectations regarding them. And as such, are we breeding them or picking certain dogs or other animals that reflect back the qualities that we want? So we may be outside of breeding kennels or breeding experts. We may be doing that anyway. And we do have some proof that there are evolutionary movements in play with dogs that now have movement in their eyebrows and facial muscles that were never present in wolves, because they have learned to reflect back like that cute puppy dog look, because we respond so well to it. Yeah. So I think that's fascinating. There's some wonderful videos online about Bunny, the talking dog, that has learned to use the buttons. And it is, I don't want to say frightening, because it's not frightening. It is paradigm shifting to watch a dog look in the mirror, look at the reflection, and then go over to the buttons and ask who that is. Is that Bunny? Is this Bunny? And I'm paraphrasing how the question is framed.
Oh, yeah.
And there's controversy about whether or not there are some detractors out there that are saying that that's not what the dog is doing. It's just learn to use the buttons. But
it's communication where it's never been at that level before. And it's pretty incredible. I say we just respect animals and stop trying to play God with them for especially this purity factor, this beauty factor. And hey, thanks for the introduction into the wide world of dog shows.
Yeah, I'm surprised too. And hopefully my dear friend will still be speaking to me after this.
Yeah,
because we had to talk about some of the darker things. But
it's all my fault, Jake.
Everybody, thank you so much for tuning in this week. We've got some big things coming up.
Yeah, a great Get Vocal this weekend. Yeah. So it's probably going to be a longer one because we have a lot of research. There's a lot of history with this case we're going to cover, but I think you guys are going to absolutely find it fascinating.
Yeah, if you were on our social media and you saw a pic of us in the last week, we'll be talking about that a lot. Yes. We will not be covering in this Get Vocal this particular dog show issue. It'll be a completely different issue, but we will devote further time in the future to coming back to this subject to talk about it, because I know our listeners will want to.
Yeah, I want to hear about the case that you worked on. I think I know which one you're talking about, and have Detective Molly on if she'll come on.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Cool.
So everybody have a great week. COVID is still out there. Get vaxxed, get boosted, be careful. And please be safe and take care of yourself and take care of each other.
Absolutely. We'll see you next time on LA
Not So
Confidential. Bye-bye.
Bye, folks.
We sincerely thank you for spending some time with us today. LA Not So Confidential is part of the Crawlspace Media Network. Each episode is hosted, produced, and written by Dr. Scott and Dr. Shiloh. Our podcast production editing and sweetening magic is handled by the multi-talented Jason Usry of Ear Cult Productions.
The LA Not So Confidential theme entitled Cool Vibes Film Noir is used via a Creative Commons Attribution license. Cool Vibes is composed and performed by Kevin MacLeod, who graciously allows us to use his great music. Please check out his amazing work on YouTube.
All of the resources for each episode can be found on our website at la-not-so-confidential.com. You can find us on Instagram at LA Not So Podcast, on Twitter at LA Not So Pod, and on Facebook at LA Not So Confidential.
Please hit follow so you never miss a new episode. Lastly, we'd be honored if you joined our Patreon at patreon.com/LA Not So Podcast, so you can be the first to be notified about upcoming live events, social gatherings, and super cool swag coming your way.
Thanks for listening, and please join us each Saturday afternoon following the episode drop for a live streaming and very interactive broadcast on Get Vocal entitled Behind the Couch.
Thanks for listening, and join us next time.